Hello friends, it seems that March is the month of reading massive books, and I've even seen the name Mammoth March floating about all across BookTube, and I myself am currently working through a 1,000+ page book at the moment, this experimental German novel set to release later this summer. So, in spirit of Mammoth March, I figured I'd share with you some of the massive books I've read in the past, and more importantly, tell you whether they're worth reading. The first novel I want to discuss is probably the most hated and adored doorstopper that exists, and that is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Just finishing this book is somewhat of a consolation prize, and I will be honest, as much as I do love this book, it's a lot of bloviating, it's a lot that could be edited down tremendously. It sort of has three concurrent plot lines. You have Hal and Condenza in the tennis academy, Don Gately in the recovery house, and then you have this whole Quebecois situation, which in my opinion, you could kind of disregard. It does bleed a bit into the other plot lines, but for the most part, it could be expunged from the novel, and the valuable components in the novel overall would still be intact, in my opinion. But why I love this book and why I think it's worth reading is because it does a phenomenal job through the vast, diverse characters that you're exposed to at exposing the uncomfortable, grim, bleak truths about human existence or the human condition, which I know, a very highbrow, pretentious term to use, but another way of putting it as Matt at Colossum Books puts it, is this book does a good job at expressing how hard it is to be human. Anxiety, self-consciousness, trauma, addiction, depression, all of these show up in this novel, and for that reason, you know, when Wallace himself was experiencing alcohol addiction and depression, which led to his own unfortunate death, you really feel his own reflections carrying through and bleeding onto the page, specifically with some of the analogies in the sobriety scenes or in the recovery house about this spider and the grip that addiction has on somebody. I found to be really profound, really insightful. There's plenty of prescient insights in here as well, especially when it comes to the satirical components of this book. There's even aspects that I would say he kind of predicted the existence of filters and things like that, and FaceTime and other aspects, and then the whole kind of premise about this infinitely entertaining film cartridge, just feels like it's somewhat adjacent to TikTok in the way that we're scrolling with such a fleeting attention span. So this book to me, is it going to work for everybody? Hell no, it's not going to work for everybody. There are lapses of value within this book, as there are with a lot of 1,000-page novels, and especially with any kind of maximalist novel like this. But as a whole, as a totality, I love it. I look forward to rereading it in the future. So I definitely recommend taking on the task that is Infinite Jest. Generally, Mammoth books are 800 pages plus, but I do have two exceptions throughout this video, and one of them is Demons by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I'm going to be rereading this book later this fall, along with my book club, so if you're interested in doing that, the link will be in the description. But Demons to me is probably Dostoevsky's greatest novel. I do love another novel of his, which I'll be talking about in a minute, and you could really argue for, make a strong case for any of the other novels, but to me, Demons just requires much more effort and dissection to really grapple with and understand the different philosophical and political ideas that he's trying to expose you to within this novel. And also, the last part in this, part 3, and those final chapters are so disconcerting. They're so eerie, and really the entire book is quite unnerving and haunting, especially with the ideology that slowly ensnares the town and culminates into this fury of fast-paced events and deaths and this fire. All of it is just incredible and really consumed me as I was reading the final chapters of this the first time. Whether it's Nikolai Stavrogin, Varvara, Pyotr, Stepan, all of his characters by the end of the novel carry just such weight and complexity that you could really analyze them and dissect them in any kind of way. You end the novel with a plethora of questions basically about more than one character. And for that reason, it's a phenomenal novel and really makes the length of it work for it. Now, another novel from Dostoevsky that is equally magnificent is Bratya Karamazovi, or The Brothers Karamazov. Now, this novel for most people is probably going to be more enjoyable, more digestible, and offer more practical takeaways and themes that you can extract from it than Demons. But I still stand by the idea that Demons is the more complex or higher level novel to read. That said, The Brothers Karamazov is still plenty complex. This novel delves into heavy theological questions and philosophical questions as well, such as the absence of God, the role of morality within society, and you're situated behind three different perspectives throughout the novel, all three different sons: Ivan Karamazov, Alexei Karamazov, and Dmitry Karamazov. And each of them represent, different ideologies or ways of viewing it. Alexei is the more theological and the more idealist. Ivan is the more rational, pragmatic, and Dmitry is the more sensualist type. And it's just an incredible story. The characters truly come alive, probably more than the other novels. And to me, this novel, again, I could praise all of Dostoevsky's novels. That's why he's one of the greats. But this novel, just like Demons, has so many layers. The length of the book, clocking in at just under 800 pages, really works for it. It's just, to me, it really is a classic that stands up to that title of being a classic, of being one of the greatest novels. So if you haven't read it, March is the time. We're just going to keep rolling with the Russian books, and I know that there must be one specific mammoth that is on everyone's mind, and that is War and Peace, the massive Russian epic by Leo Tolstoy. And I just finished this book a few weeks ago. I read it along with the book club, and it was one hell of an experience. To me, this book is one of the more audacious projects ever taken on by an author, primarily because of the way that it tries to blend and compress so many different disciplines into one story. You have this massive, long-winded fictional story with a diverse set of characters, each thoroughly developed. But that's not just it. You also have historical commentary all throughout. You have theological and philosophical commentary throughout. It really just feels like this 1,000-layer cake that, you could look at it as a historical fiction. You could look at especially the epilogue as this philosophical pamphlet or essay. It's really, like I said, an audacious project by Tolstoy that in some ways falls short only because it is so extensive. The end feels a tad rushed to me. And it's just hard to compress all of this into one book. And I say that because his other novel, which we'll get to in a moment, to me, just feels like a more concise, well-rounded story rather than what we get in War and Peace. So I guess, to put it succinctly, I feel like a less is more approach would have been a bit better. That said, still, monumental, magnificent novel, well worth a read. It'll be a long journey, but a well-enjoyed journey as well. And the other novel I was referencing was, of course, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. In my opinion, Anna Karenina is Tolstoy's greatest novel. Clocking in at just under 800 pages, it's all-encompassing, it's extensive. You're getting this panoptical view of Russian society and Russian culture, but primarily the novel hinges upon moral, ideological, philosophical debate on passion and love and infidelity. You're getting a look at the kind of restrictions that women had in their rights and in their freedom at the time as well within society and culture. But you also have rich, profound passages with Lovin, who is probably my favorite character within this novel. And you're also getting into the kind of politics of the time within Russia, the changing feudal system and agricultural system within the country. It's heavy, it's all-encompassing, it's what you would expect in a Tolstoy novel. And to me, like I said, it's just a tad better than War and Peace for my money. Now, a little break from the fiction. I do have 1,000-plus page book of nonfiction that I've read. And it happens to be Russian as well. That is The House of Government by Yuri Slezkine. This book looks at Russian society beginning at the late 1800s and all the fomentation and societal strife that was occurring at the time and how that led into the October Revolution, the Bolshevik takeover, into the totalitarian regime that we know as Stalinism and the other oppressive regimes that followed. But this novel generally ends right about World War II, so you're mainly looking at the beginning of the 20th century up towards and through World War II. But why this book is such a marvel and such an enjoyable experience is because it does it primarily through a blend of non-fictional accounts, memoirs, direct quotes, but also through these kind of fictional lenses or characters, if you will, that you're peering through. In fact, sometimes I would literally Google and jot in my notes some of these character names and then go and look them up later and realize, oh, of course, that they're not real. He's kind of like fictionalizing and blending the two together, which doesn't make it any less historically accurate. It's just the way that he tells the story and kind of personifies these experiences. It makes it work really well. The other aspect that I really love about this book, besides the kind of structure and the storytelling, the way that the narrative is told, and how it compares the ideological fanaticism at the time and capture to this millenarianism and this, again, this unabated dogmatic belief in some kind of future on the other side of destruction, and this extreme commitment to this government regime and this change in society. There's also incredible photographs throughout, smaller photos, but also bigger photos, maps, architectural designs, all of that within this that really, it was such a joy to read this book. If there are other historical books like this, definitely let me know. And for reference, I already have A People's Tragedy and Natasha's Dance on my shelf behind me, so don't feel the need to recommend that. But this was just a joy to read, and for just over 1,000 pages, I think all of you will enjoy it as well. Next up is probably the only book on this list that it's hard to recommend, and that is The Demons, not to be confused with Demons that we spoke about earlier. The Demons by Gemito van Doderer. So this is an Austrian author that is rarely in print. I think the only publisher currently printing The Demons is Wise Blood Books. And I have a long, extensive, I think it's like 45-minute video and an extensive written review on my Substack as well that you can watch. But there is a video review of this book on the channel where I describe it in much greater detail than I will now. But as you see, this is a 2-volume set. It's about 1,600 pages. But don't be confused or too intimidated. The text is quite large in this edition. And you might be able to find the older printed editions online, somewhere ranging between probably $50 and $100. The older editions might be a little less pages, but it's, how do I put it? It's a phenomenal story. It really shows you the interconnected web of Austrian society. You do have a plot that you're following with this inheritance that has kind of been hidden or kept secret or kept away from the rightful inheritor of it. You have a clandestine relationship. You have this child that was from it. And really what the novel does is it shows you, the best way to describe it is one of my favorite quotes in the book, in which it says that something along the lines of a loaded gun is placed in your hand that you did not load yourself, and nevertheless you take the shot. That fate so many times gives us these situations and plops things into our hands, opportunities or fateful events that push history along. It's very kind of War and Peace-like, honestly, in the way that it describes history and life in this very deterministic way. But overall, I'm just going to ramble and make no coherent sense if I keep going any further. But generally, how I've tried to analogize the novel is that it works like a symphony. Each individual piece seems to not really be doing much. It seems like each character's actions don't carry much consequence. But when you zoom out, when you put all the tracks, layer them all together, and listen to the symphony all at one time, it's beautiful. It's symphonic. It is harmonic. You know, it is mellifluous, and you see how each seemingly trivial action of a character or interaction or relationship that occurs it carries great consequence, and that unloaded gun that you fired was inevitable. There was no other way that, you know, that your free will was going to kind of counteract that. For that reason, you're probably still, you know, teetering on whether this even sounds like a book that's worth reading for 1,600 pages. I'll put it this way. There's not that many scenes or characters that I recall with deep reverence or admiration or love. However, I was never bored reading this book. I carried a steady state of enjoyment and curiosity from start to finish. I was never, you know, just, you know, flipping one page after another, waiting for it to be finished. So on the one hand, I can recommend it. I think it works well for the right reader. On the other hand, it's a heavy investment of your time, I feel like. So if I have you somewhat curious, go watch my review. That'll be better, or read my review. But that is my weak attempt at explaining The Demons by Gemito van Doderer. The next novel I want to talk about is another exception to this mammoth list, because it's not 800 pages plus, it's not even 700 pages, it's about like the mid 600 range. and that is Solenoid by Mircea Cărtărescu. And I think this is currently just got nominated on a long list for another award, and well deservingly so. This book, again, I've carried on and on about it in my favorite books of the year. I have I think almost an hour long video discussing this book, a written review as well. It is a delight to read. It is phantasmagoric. The prose is entrancing. I was really spellbound at multiple points reading this book. I love how it explores, both in mathematical ways and philosophical ways, the nature of reality and metaphysics. It references so many different historical figures and things as well. It blends autobiography with history, with fiction. It's a marvelous book, and if you have read or heard about Blinding as well, which is part one of his trilogy known as Orbitor, Blinding to me is a little bit more, I won't call it incoherent, but it's a little bit more discombobulated, a little bit difficult to kind of pinpoint what he's getting at, basically. This novel is also still complex, also a little bit garrulous at times. Although I love the prose, other people might be a little bit put off by it. However, it really culminates to an incredible apotheosis. The climax of this book is it is riveting. It is worth it. And for that reason, I think it's totally worth picking up and reading these 600 or so odd pages. And for the finale, what is the 1,000-page book right now, this arc that I'm currently reading that is set to publish in late August, also by Deep Vellum, which published Solenoid? That is Schattenfroh, which I'll put on the screen right now. This is a highly experimental text written by Michael Lentz, who is an author, of course, but he's also a musician. And from my reading so far, he's a scholar as well. His comprehensive knowledge of German Reformation history, German history overall, architecture, is just second to none. He is a scholar if there ever was one, and you see it poured into this novel. So what is Schattenfroh? Well, at about 700 pages into the 1,001-page book, I'm still unsure if it is absolutely one of the most brilliant things I've ever read, or if it is just a very pretentious, high-speed chess, mental gymnastic book written to kind of flatter and show off his knowledge. I think I'm leaning more towards the brilliant side of things. The only reason I hesitate is just because of my own inability to kind of connect all the dots. I feel like he's currently in the novel suspending so many different ideas and concepts. He has these Kabbalistic terms like Zinsum. He has all these theological ideas of Christ's resurrection, 666, the Holy Trinity that he's working with. His ekphrastic prose is incredible, but also kind of confusing at times. So you're kind of also trying to bring into your mind these Renaissance paintings, Hieronymus Bosch and others as well. And he has all these things suspended in the air at the same time, these autobiographical components of his father as well, that it's really difficult for me at this moment to tie it all together. The general plot is told through the lens of this character named Niemand, or in English, it's translated as nobody. And he is this character who's situated almost in like solitary confinement. He's in this confined jail cell. He has these spectacles and contraptions on his body, not allowing him to move. And his brain fluid, or brain water as it's translated, is being converted into this script. So his thoughts are almost in real time, and his perceptions are being translated into the book that you're actually reading, Schattenfroh. So there are these very stimulating, highly inventive, metaphysical depictions. The character himself that the novel's kind of named after, Schattenfroh, is this shape-shifting metaphysical character that kind of represents God, the devil, and other forces at the same time. So you have this beast that is part of the Fright-Bearing Society that is commissioned and is forcing Niemand to write this book. So you have all of this going on at one time. And on top of that, the book includes all these very experimental and sometimes like confusing or frustrating components. There's 70 pages of just handwritten names that are supposed to be victims from a bombing of the town of, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Düren in Germany. So you also have the historical components of World War II and more German history blended into this novel. There's plenty of reflections on Nazism and kind of that capture within Catholicism as well. Again, I haven't sat down long enough after finishing this book to digest it all, to reflect on it. So with all that I just threw up and vomited out towards you, I still don't have any final thoughts on it, of course. I have 300 more pages to go. I will be writing a detailed review of the book once I finish it, so subscribe to the Substack. Obviously, continue to follow the channel. I'll most likely talk about it in the future. But if you are interested, it is available for pre-order. I did fortunately receive this art from Deep Vellum, obviously for review. So stay tuned. I've been sharing some of my thoughts on Instagram as well. So if you are looking to get kind of more real-time thoughts, follow me on there. But I don't know. I personally, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. I like a book that challenges me. I like a book that pushes me intellectually, that makes me have to get outside of my comfort zone, that makes me question my own intellectual capability. Like a Gravity's Rainbow, like a Solenoid or Blinding, like a any kind of Pynchon. Well, I already mentioned a Pynchon novel, but those kinds of works that make you have to do more work than what's purely on the page. You might have to do more research. You might have to, again, take these different other forms or mediums of art and see how they're influencing this work. I like doing that. But at the same time, I do think at some point, some of these more experimental novels that come out are almost purely for one to kind of flatter themselves, or for people that like books that are more riddles and puzzles than they are novels, if that makes sense. So on the one hand, I think the novel's brilliant. On the other hand, it's not for most readers, and I don't even know if it's for me. But it's to be determined. But that's basically as much as I could possibly say about the novel at this time. But I am curious to see how it ends. Again, there's another third to go, so I'd be curious to hear any of your thoughts in the comments below. Again, what do you like, those kinds of novels that are more like 1,000-piece puzzles to solve, or do you like a book that's a little bit more apparent, a little bit more explicit in what it's trying to convey to the reader? Let me know, and also let me know, what massive book are you currently reading, or do you plan to read in the near future? Comment down below. Love to hear your thoughts on this, on the idea of massive books, or anything else I've discussed in this video. Like the video, share it, subscribe for more content like this, and I will see you all in the next one.